Moving on to tonight's event, ransomware and cybersecurity. What I'd like to do is bring up our moderator who can then introduce the August panel. Let me tell you about Jason. Jason Bernstein is a partner and co-chair of the Data Security and Privacy Group of the law firm Barnes and Thornburg. He's paid to be psychotic, neurotic, and paranoid. He thinks about what can go wrong, what the threats are, where they come from, and helps his clients anticipate bad things and show them how to prevent that from happening again. He works with clients to proactively improve data security and develop policies and procedures for incident response. He is a frequent speaker nationally on in various organizations on how companies can respond to emerging cybersecurity threats, improve risk management, and more effectively negotiate agreements with customers and vendors. With that, Jason, where are you? Come on up here and introduce your group.
Paranoid guy is here. Thank you. I will sit in a moment after I introduce everybody and we get the panel set. I'm not sure we're going to need this one. So I'm going to leave this one here and off. Welcome. We've got about an hour to start figuring out what is going to be of interest to you folks as a really diverse audience. All right. So we've got a really diverse set of people here to help. First, we have Jodi Daniels. Jodi, why don't you come on up? Jodi's the founder of Red Clover Advisors. She advises companies in all phases of the development cycle regarding to online and digital data privacy and privacy by design. Her specialty is in digital media. So every single one of your companies is involved with digital media, because how many of you are involved with print media anymore? She was the digital privacy partner at Bank of America, and also was a prime director of privacy at Cox Automotive. She has her master's and undergraduate from Emory, and of course, she is a CIPP, Certified Information Privacy Professional. So welcome, Jodi, and appreciate you being here. If you've done something wrong, don't talk to Samir. Samir Kaushal, please come up and join us, or come on down, whichever the phrase is. He graduated right from here. Before there was traffic, he graduated from here. And he's got a bachelor's in computer science, so he is familiar with your world, our world. And then he went north and somehow went to Michigan Law School. He has worked as a software engineer and doing ad hoc coding and network work. And he also was up in New York before he finally decided to come back warm. He currently works as a federal prosecutor in the economics and cybercrime sections of the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Atlanta. So we're going to hear a very different perspective and hopefully get some good examples in a generic sense of things that he's been seeing and his group has been seeing. And last and certainly not least, somebody that you all know, Karun, please come on up. Come on down. Karun Rajasekharan has been working network and security technology for over 20 years. So he's, in dog years, he's older than all of us. He's been working that long. He was previously with ISS, where he ran both the engineering and product development groups. He also founded Virima, a cloud-based IT operations company. He currently consults in the cloud and security space in product management, architect, being involved in cloud-based security, compliance, and cloud architecture. Our panels. First, at least from this standpoint, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, good. We're going to have this as a conversation among the four of us. All right, it's 10 after 7. We have until a total of what time? Where's Carolyn? We have until we have a total of an hour from now, or how long?
We're going to finish at 7:55 tonight. We will finish down, and then we'll take audience questions starting at about 7:35.
Okay, we have about 25 minutes. All right, so being from New York, I can talk faster than a lot of other people. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some questions field them, and then around 7:35, you don't have to watch the clock, we'll let you know. We'll wind up and we'll have some Q&A. All right, so we got very different perspectives on things. But what I wanted to start off with was because you guys are in all different areas, and it was really hard to figure out and pigeonhole what to direct the audience to, or to direct our conversation to. Let's talk about first off from sort of the emerging trends and issues from different perspectives. So Jodi, from your perspective in the marketing and privacy and data collection usage, what kind of things have you been seeing about, and when I say emerging, you know, if this were in the banking industry or hospital industry, you could just say emerging in the past 5 years. I should say in the last 6 months, what's emerging, or in recent context.
Sure, can everyone, that's on. Can you hear? Okay, what do I know? So it's all about you. Everyone's trying to target you. Previously, everyone's been talking about the device. I'm trying to target the device, and I only know that it's device 123. I don't know that it's actually Jodi's device. Well, there's numerous companies out there, and all of our data in here has been sold many times over, and they are able to connect and figure out that it's you. So the big trend is, where is your data going? If you sold it knowingly to company A or you shared it with company A, do you have any idea that it has then been sold from company A to company B, from company B to company C? Kind of call that daisy chaining, but it's a very common practice. And we were talking about email providers. So email marketing is all about being very personable and getting to you, but that data sale, or maybe not even sale, data scraping, data sharing, but you're gonna see a lot more targeted ads whether you like it or not.
So the Minority Report movie,
Yes.
you know, it's not coming, it's already here.
It is here.
So as a consequence of that, people do good things and people do bad things. When people do bad things, what kinds of things, Samir, have you been seeing and encountering over the past year or two from the Department of Justice viewpoint?
So, can everyone hear me? So, before I answer the question, I thought it would make sense just to give you some context on what the U.S. Attorney's Office is. I know that most of you probably don't know what we do. You don't know what a federal prosecutor does. Basically, the U.S. Attorney's Office is located downtown. We investigate federal crimes and also handle civil actions on behalf of the United States. Our section, my section, is the economic crime section and cybercrime section. And we investigate all types of fraud schemes, Ponzi schemes, insider trading, credit card scams, PII theft, computer intrusions, and a host of other types of crimes. And we primarily work in the cyber arena with the FBI here in Atlanta. They have a big cyber squad. And in that world, there's a couple things that we've been seeing a lot of. I think the most common thing that we see is business email compromises. And actually, I think the Fraudmark presenter kind of hit on a key point. The most common way people get information is through social engineering. So we see a lot of social engineering, a lot of changing one character in an email address to look familiar to another email address that you know. And you'd be amazed at how many different organizations will wire hundreds of thousands of dollars just on an email saying, send this money to Hong Kong right now. Don't ask any questions, just send it now. I need it sent, and the money will get sent out. And only days later, or sometimes much, much later, the company realizes that the email address that was used to send that was actually the boss's email address with an extra character plugged in somewhere. So 2 N's on a last name, or 2 I's, or a special I, an I placed in between 2 letters where it's almost invisible. Extremely common. So that's probably the number one thing that we see, social engineering, not complex computer intrusions. Although I do think that would be probably the second thing that our office deals with. We often deal with malware of different types. Our office prosecuted the creator of the Citadel malware, and other similar banking Trojans, SpyEye, which is also malware used to steal PII log into financial institutions and steal credit card and other banking information. So that's another thing that we see, that's to be expected. I don't think that's really an emerging trend. Ransomware, that's another thing that's huge right now. And I'm sure y'all are all familiar with what that is.
Are you seeing any new variations in malware or in ransomware, or the way it's being approached, or the type of companies, large, small, that are seem more commonly hit these days?
So in terms of malware, I think that the next wave is going to be Internet of Things. It's going to be, whatever devices you have in your home are being used in a way that's unexpected, maybe used to conduct, maybe your refrigerator becomes part of a botnet and you don't know, and it's helping send DDoS attacks, because now everything is starting to become plugged in. And I think the next wave is going to be compromises of those devices for uses that are not expected, and to surveil and take information from the people that device is around. And I think that's probably the next wave in terms of malware and botnet type stuff. There are some other things that we see now that could be meaningful to folks like y'all who work in the industry. State-sponsored hacking is, I wouldn't say it's extremely common, but it is something that we see, and I'm sure you've read about it in the papers. And one of the reasons why the U.S. Attorney's Office comes out and does outreach to companies and innovators like y'all is to help you become familiar with our faces and know that we are here to help you. If you report crimes to us or the FBI, we are going to work to try and help you. And sometimes when you see something that looks like it's not a big deal, for example, you see an intrusion on your systems and it doesn't look like any data was stolen, it could still be meaningful to law enforcement. It could still be meaningful for intelligence purposes. It could be something related to a large-scale state-sponsored intelligence operation. So it always makes sense to report. If you see something that looks suspicious, you should report it and let the FBI know, so that it could be part of something bigger than just pinging your server and trying to figure out if you have a weak firewall or something of that nature.
So let me interrupt you for a second. If you report to the FBI or Department of Justice, obviously in that case, the FBI is on your side. They're not going to be investigating you in the negative sense. Is there anything in terms of that kind of investigation going over to a regulator? Where are you guys going to report that incident over to the banking regulators, the healthcare regulators, saying, "Hey, those guys just had an incident"?
So I'll admit that I was tapped in to sub for Steve Grimberg from my office. My supervisor actually came into my office last night around 6 p.m. and said that he had some court things he had to take care of today. So I ended up subbing in for him. He sent me the list of questions, and I saw that there were references to regulators. And I asked him what did they mean by regulators? Because typically in our office, we are not oriented around dealing with any sort of regulatory entity. Occasionally there's work with the SEC that I'm going to say is probably not going to be anything pertinent to a technology or cyber related case. Our job is to identify criminals and work to prosecute them. So we're not in the business of information sharing for the most part, in part because we can't. There's legal procedural impediments to us taking information that we've obtained through an investigation and just start handing it out to different entities. We can't do that without special permission.
So if the FCC is interested because AT&T, Verizon, whoever has had an issue for which they've contacted you, for which AT&T, for example, has contacted you about and said, "We've had this incident," you're not going to communicate that to the FCC? I mean, typically, I'm trying to get a comfort level here of where things typically go.
I have not heard of an instance where there would be an overlap in interest, where they would have an interest in obtaining material that we got through an investigation. And legally, we cannot hand over grand jury material, which is, to take a step back, when we open an investigation, we impanel what's called a grand jury, which is responsible for conducting that investigation. That's a group of citizens who help the government examine evidence and prepare cases for indictment. That panel's decisions and review of evidence and its obtaining of material in pursuit of an indictment, none of that information can go out to the public. We can't just hand that out to anyone. In fact, there's a civil component to our office, and sometimes there are subject matter overlaps. For example, not in your industry, but in the healthcare industry, there's sometimes an inquiry on the civil side regarding, let's say, Medicare fraud. And there's also a criminal case that's going on at the same time. Now, that's one of the very rare instances where there might be some coordination even within our own office between the criminal and civil components. Typically, that would never happen. And in fact, we can't just, even in that instance, we still can't hand over the material that we've obtained through a criminal investigation to the civil side. So
there's a pretty good wall there that, one of the things we wanted to sort of make people aware of tonight is, hopefully you don't have to worry about this. But if you do, it's not as though, if you report an incident, a lot of companies do report incidents to the FBI, sometimes for very good reason. Like if there's like a spoof, one of my clients, the university, had about $300,000 that they wired out because of a spoof, contacted the FBI, but not before they wired another $700,000 out. So we got a cool $1 million from a university, right? Ill afford to be able, the university are making a profit on these things. The FBI was able to get the $700,000 back in the account because it was within 48 hours or so. So sometimes it's a good thing if you can contact the authorities early because you can do it. We can move on because we're going to make sure we get time. Go very briefly, from your perspective, your experience, where are you seeing things in terms of architecture, the cloud? What are some of the things you're seeing, either the service providers or the customers focusing on more recently than you've seen before?
Sure, yeah. So I work with a lot of smaller companies who are trying to, a lot of IoT devices, etc., medical devices. And what they tend to do is they are a small vendor in the large hospital chain. So everyone in that chain has to be HIPAA compliant, and there's a sort of ripple effect down. And you mentioned that about privacy, going from A to B to C, etc. So it's the same kind of hierarchy where there's a big hospital chain, for example, has many sub-vendors, and the vendors have their own sub-vendors. And the final vendor, which could be a company that I'm advising, is putting the data on Amazon Cloud. And then so somebody right at the top, corporate security, has to say, this is my data secure through that chain. And it's now a much more complex chain. In the old days, companies had them all in-house. It's now spread all over the world. And here's the catch, is that many companies haven't really caught on. You look at it, we have to answer a lot of, I have them, clients answer some of these questionnaires, assessment forms, and compliance requests. And you look at the question and says, this implies that the data is inside the organization. It's not. It's on Amazon under somebody else's account, right? So the questions and the challenges are still having, they need to keep up with that. So that's really the key part is organizations at the top level need to understand where the data is going and really ask the right question, because I could look at it and say, you're missing a lot of loopholes here. You're not asking the right questions.
So by show of hands, how many folks are involved with data in whatever form, from whatever source, going into or out of the cloud, and how to think about that? Probably a good 40%. So one of the things that, again, trying to make sure that we sort of cover things in depth, but not too deep or too broad. One of the things that is obviously wireless context in Internet of Things, IoT. Everything from pacemakers and the security aspects. You can see how, if let's say Vice President Pence has a heart monitor or a pacemaker put in, it's got wireless connection. It's not just hacking into it, it's altering it. So one thing, for my part, I think one quick example, because this is happening recently. So if you build products or services, and you have anything that touches Internet of Things and connectedness, think about this. One of my clients is a large lock company. One of their products is wireless door locks. Hundreds of thousands of them out there. From homes, commercial, to government, to defense, They're one of the higher end companies. They called me about 6 months ago. There was a software vulnerability, not a hack, not a breach. Their circuit board vendor found there's a vulnerability in the software in the log. They called me and said, "We got a PR nightmare. What do we do?" So again, think about this in the context of whatever business mode you might be in. And it's an interesting question because, okay, you can roll out a patch, a special patch for that, but you're a premium company. You want people to know there's a vulnerability. You don't want to advertise saying, "Oh, we found a vulnerability, here's how to fix." Or do you wait until you have your next normal update? Let's just slide it in. And then say, well, security enhancements. But that vulnerability in a wireless door lock would enable a hacker to be able to interrupt the circuit and unlock the doors. All right, you can see where this is in hospitals, in government installations, in certain types, all sorts of environments. You can see where this would be a real problem. What's the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of locks out there? In one building, it could be 1,000 locks, 500 locks. Some locks get updated manually with a little device, some locally by remote, some externally by the internet. So when you think about your device design, your product design, how do you think about a hardware product? But you have to update a hardware product. You know, people that make locks don't think about the products being updated. You buy a lock, it works until it breaks. You got software. So think of all the devices, from Samsung's new refrigerator that got this monstrous pad on it, iPad on it, to a Tesla and everything else that has the ability to have a vulnerability. What do you do to correct it? How do you correct it? When do you correct it? If you don't tell people about it, and you sort of slide it in and they don't go out and update everything, whatever your product is, and all of a sudden the hacker exploits it, well, the patch was out there, but if they didn't install the patch because they didn't think it was that important, right? Liability. You can see we're also, in every business, whether you're a customer, you're a vendor, developer, whatever, everybody's thinking about liability. Everyone. You're a customer or you're a vendor. And the same company is a customer and a vendor, depending on the situation. So, that's one of the things in security is, in the ecosystem, you're sometimes you're being chased and sometimes you're the chaser. But you got to think about, so what happens if? So as Jodi was saying before, in terms of privacy by design, well, data collection, data usage, data management design, but think about when you're building a product, you got to figure out how to update the darn thing. Well, that's one way, but what if you don't necessarily want to advertise that update too much or upgrade? So yeah, something you're thinking about. Hopefully we'll have some questions on that when we get to it. Let's talk about, since everybody's talking about data security and privacy, Jodi, talk to us about understanding how to think about personally identifiable information as an asset and data, and sort of within an organization about what happens with it. If you're a software developer, you think about data as bit stream. It goes into the software and goes out. But in reality, if you're marketing, you think about data. What are you doing with it? What's sort of the various aspects in this universe that you have to think about your data? Because everybody's got data in their companies.
Right. So a couple different thoughts. So personally identifiable information can also mean different things to different people. And if you're in the US or if you're in Europe, it also has a different connotation. So, and from a breach perspective, so for example, name and email and address by itself might not be, if someone was to get into it, that might not dictate a data breach from a security standpoint. But from a privacy standpoint, my marketing friends really want access to that data. And now if my name and email get out there, and there's a nice phishing attack, because we don't have Thornburg here to help us, and now you have a whole bunch of customers who click on that, and they have harm, who are they going to blame when they hear what happened? Are they going to blame the middle person who took it? No, they're going to blame you because you didn't protect it properly. You didn't think about, oh, I have this name and email, and what database is it going to? What vendor is it going to? Did I think about that? So I'm always adamant on that design factor before you do anything regarding data. First, know what fields you're talking about. What personally identifiable information? An IP address is always one of my favorite ones, as is location. because some people think that's not personal information by the letter of the law. Well, if you're in Europe or if you're dealing with children, it is. IP address is personal information, and my personal view is you'll probably start seeing that more and more, and you should treat it like personal information. And it goes to the use case. Am I connecting IP address to something else? If it's IP address all by itself, maybe. If I'm connecting it with other information, it really now is a personally identifiable piece. And location is also. I mean, how many of us are sitting with our iPhones and someone could figure out exactly where we are? So it might not be personally identifiable because you don't know it was Jodi Daniels, but you know where I am, and if you have 3 other data points, which nowadays isn't hard to figure out, you put it all together in a nice little bow, and now you know where I am. So you also have what's public information versus non-public information. So you can go on the internet, you can type in Jodi Daniels, you can find out all kinds of information about me. But what do you have inside that's connected to other information that no one else is going to have? What's that non-public information? And how are you protecting that? Who's using it? And what questions are you asking before you go on your merry way to design, release, update?